Imagine you are a Roman legionary, just one soldier in a massive movement of troops, part of a giant convoy of men, which is 10 miles long. Each one of you are marching to quell a local rebellion, something you expect should be fairly easy to put down. Your leaders have taken you down an unfamiliar path, though, through a dense forest. The path littered with fallen trees and dogged by poor visibility, but you keep marching on. That is until you realize something's gone very wrong. Initially, you and everyone around you is just confused. Something's happening ahead, but you're not quite sure what. And then the javelins start to rain down on you. You've been led into an ambush, betrayed by one of your own leaders, a man who secretly has been plotting against the Romans for years, playing both sides. And, as this battle will show, a man who, eventually, will become history's most successful freedom fighter. Hello, and welcome to a very special episode of History's Most Successful Freedom Fighter. My name is Peter.
And I'm Alex, and the reason this episode is so special is because it's the very first of our collaborative kind of interview episodes. And today we are joined by Jacob from Podcast on Germany. Thank you for joining us, Jacob.
Oh, it is my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
And we're going to go further back than we've ever gone before today, which is exciting. Yep. We're going to go to the antiquity, ancient times, to talk about history's most successful freedom fighter. Jacob, would you like to tell us who that is?
Sure. Today we'll be talking about Arminius, the Roman general turncoat who was helped the Germans get their freedom, freeing the entire two provinces between the Elbe and the Rhine rivers.
Right. So, well, when did this happen? Let's set a specific time period. What years?
Sure. So, the official start for this rebellion begins in with the Battle of Teutoburg Forest, and the fighting will continue until the end of that, and about 4 years before Arminius' death in 17 AD.
Right.
So we're talking really kind of not long after the birth of Christ, almost 2,000, well, more than 2,000 years ago now.
Yeah.
Let's set the scene a little bit here. Why was the Roman Empire interested in Germany, or Germania, as it called it? Was Germania a key kind of for trade? Were there natural resources, or were the Romans just kind of looking for glory? Why were they kind of attacking Germania in the first place?
Well, Germania is a very poor region. It's swamps, it's trees, it's hills. There's not much there in material wealth or in trade goods. In fact, the best that we can tell they had was amber, and that was coming from the far north, way outside of Roman control. So they don't offer much in material. But what they did offer was opportunity for war, which is what a certain commander by the name of Drusius, who is the nephew of Augustus, he takes the opportunity to invade Germany to make a name for himself. And he does rather well. He does 3 invasions. He almost is killed a couple of times, and then he dies during the third one due to his horse falling on him and breaking his leg.
Wow.
Very, very surprise death for this young general of Rome. But when he dies, he has all this territory that is technically under Roman control that they're kind of stuck with. And since 9 AD, the Romans are now in this territory, basically with a couple of forts, a couple of merchants, but no major cities set up yet. They're just starting to get into the territory to start to set it up. So this entire conquest wasn't really by choice by the emperor. It was done by one of his relatives who just, he really wanted to make a name for himself. And he did that by conquering this entire dangerous and mysterious realm that the Romans actually had feared in previous generations.
So if Germania had very little value, why was it that the Romans were insisting on kind of staying there and ruling the German people, or Germanic people, I guess you might say? If it didn't carry any benefit, surely it was just a drain on the empire.
It was a drain in a way, but overall, I mean, they have it. They're not getting a good reason to give it up.
Uh-huh.
And there is one advantage in holding the territory. It helps create a buffer zone between the uncontrolled tribes and Gaul and Italy itself. And so by holding on to Germania, they at least will create this nice little zone that if there's any problems coming from the north or the east, they have to go through this poor territory that we control first before they hit our richer provinces. So overall, there's no reason to give it up if no one's going to force us to give it up. And, there's a nice security benefit to keeping it.
Right, yeah. The Romans did like a buffer zone. I'm thinking of the area north of Hadrian's Wall, between the Antonine Wall. That was a bit later, of course, but interesting that it was seen as kind of, the value of it was actually in it being a kind of distraction for these unruly tribes. I suppose we should move then to Arminius himself. One of the things when we kind of knew we were doing this episode, and I must admit I didn't know very much about him. One thing that surprised me was the fact that he was, raised from an early age in Rome. Why was that, and what effect did that have on his kind of life?
Well, that was actually a very common thing for the Romans to do. They would take the noble sons of the tribes and have them be raised inside Rome itself. And there was a couple of reasons for this. First reason was just basically, I have your son, you step out of line, your son is mine to put in prison, to execute, or even to send after you to kill you. Whatever I want to do with them, I can do. So it was a way of keeping the tribes in line. Another thing is, these are the future leaders of their tribes. So if you raise them in Roman culture, you show them the wealth, the benefits, the luxury that they could have being under Roman rule. When they go home, they can tell their tribes, hey, being under Roman rule, that's not so bad. If we do what they want, they'll give us all these wonderful, amazing things. And then the Romans don't have to worry so much about them rising up in rebellion later on. And Arminius was not one of the first ones to be taken in. There's actually another leader during this time by the name of Marbutus, who has the same upbringing as Arminius. He's raised in the Roman court. And he's so trusted that he's sent back to his tribe, and he's able to get them to move from the Rhine over towards the Danube, far away from the Roman forces at the time. Later on, he'll be a problem for the Romans and Arminius, but at the time, he was seen as a success.
How did being raised in Rome really affect his kind of outlook on, well, I mean, his own people, I suppose, would be one thing, and as well as just kind of life in general?
So Arminius, being raised in the Roman world, taught him several things about the Romans. It taught him that, first of all, Rome was the superpower. There was no one compared to them. No one that the Germans could even hope of competing with the Romans. Second, it taught him how to fight. It taught him what their tactics were, what the best combat was during the time, how to wear and properly order Roman troops. It also taught him the skills of diplomacy. The Romans were always very good diplomats, even if they were already planning to kill you. They were always very sweet-worded. He would learn that from them. And overall, he would develop his plan for the freedom of Germania from his time from his time living in Rome and working as a Roman soldier, which he would do during the Illyricum revolts later on in his life. His time spent with the Romans is very important in molding his plan for freeing the German tribes and setting up what became known as the Northern Roman frontier.
Right. Now, I would assume that it's it would be kind of interesting to be raised in a society where, like, you're being formed by the Romans and taught about the people that you are of, and have be molded into the way where you kind of sympathize with your people, because you're living in Rome, you're raised in Rome.
Kind of what was his outlook on his own people?
Yeah, what was his outlook on his own people? I guess from a young age.
We don't know too much about his outlook from a young age. We know that when he was older, specifically when he's working for Varus in Germania, he realized that his own people were completely screwed up and were going to be unable to fight Rome in its current situation. Germany was a factional, tribal-based society. Tribes were more interested in fighting tribes rather than dealing with a large superpower to their southern border. And even with Roman occupation, the revolts that would happen were short-lived or short-tempered, and they would quickly turn around and start fighting one another rather than dealing with the bigger picture. And so Arminius came away with the realizing that Germany, unless it's unified under one leader, under one idea, it was just not going to be able to do anything about the occupiers and their territory. And he was going to have to somehow provide that leadership and that single focus to keep the Romans out.
Right. So he had this idea for quite a while, I'd assume.
Yeah, no one's quite sure when he really started this plan. Up to literally the day of the Battle of Teutoburg Forest, he was considered a perfect German barbarian.
Yeah,
he was a Roman citizen. He was a trusted friend of Varus. He had connections back in Rome. Everyone trusted and believed that he would be the next future step for Roman control of Germany. So the Romans are never sure when he actually starts on this path. Most historians argue that's typically probably when he's working for Varus and the years right before, when he's dealing with the Illyricum revolts, that he really starts thinking about this.
Right.
Okay. Shall we kind of go through his kind of early career? So we've had him, he's raised in Rome, he's been trained in all these, he's been given a classical education, he's knowledge about diplomacy, warfare, that sort of thing. He knows all the Roman ways. How exactly do the Romans see him? What's his role once he kind of enters his adulthood?
So his initial role within the Roman army is simply as an auxiliary force leader. He's to gather recruits from Germany. He's to lead them. He's to provide a strong bond between these auxiliary forces and the Roman soldiers to make sure that they work together. He's supposed to be that bridge between them. And he does his job during the Illyricum revolts, helping out with that. Afterwards, when he goes and works for Varus, he is a diplomat. He's got basically three parts of his job. The first part of his job is to serve as a diplomat to his home tribe. which is tribe located to the east and to the north of Trucy. He's supposed to go and talk with them, keep them in line, make sure there's no plots happening over there. His second job is as a translator and as a what we consider like a cultural advisor. He was there to make sure that the Romans didn't do anything that was going to insult the Germans. He was there to help translate where he could when Varus needed to talk to a local tribe. And then finally, he was to serve overall as Varus's eyes and ears in the territory. So while he's out on missions for Varus, he's to keep his ears and his eyes open, make sure that nothing is going on that's suspicious. And he wouldn't be the only one. There would be a lot of Germans out there who would be doing this job for the Romans.
It's kind of interesting, it's his job to keep his eyes and ears peeled for any potential, uprisings or anything like that. And well,
he's in the perfect position to do it.
It's ironic.
Uniquely placed, isn't he? If he's the one feeding the intelligence.
I did have a question. I wanted to ask about Varus, because we're talking a lot about him. Who exactly was him? Just like a quick rundown. Was he? Sorry.
Yeah. So Publius Quintilius Varus. I'm really sure I'm terrible with Latin pronunciation, so I'm pretty sure I butchered that. But he's a mixed bag for historians. We still argue. I was still trying to decide whether or not I thought he was a good choice or not. But historians still argue about him to this day of whether or not he was a mistake to put in, or it just so happened that Varus got caught in this trap. But he was a governor of Africa before this. He was a governor of Syria, where he put down a major revolt. And then he comes to Germany. So he has experience ruling provinces in the Roman Empire before. He's married into Augustus's family, so that always works in your favor in the Roman world. He's not the best of the governors. That's been admitted because after his putting down that rebellion, he's kind of put on the shelf for about 10 years because there were some questions about his brutality. But he has experience, so him coming in, that could have been a good decision, or he was just the very worst decision the Romans could make. It's up to the reader and the person to decide what they think about that.
Right.
I'm intrigued about the Romans considering a provincial governor being too brutal with native people. What do you have to do?
The sources are unclear if he was too brutal or if he was just like, yeah, he did fine, but now we need another governor in. So it's never been clear. Now,
right.
The revolt he deals with is in Jerusalem, which, if you know anything about the Roman Empire, Jerusalem was always a huge pain in the butt for the Romans. They put down so many revolts over there. So Varus having to deal with a revolt over there, that's nothing for the Romans. They're used to that.
So let's go to Germany then. We've got Varus, an experienced provincial governor. We've got his, advisor, Arminius, who's, as we said, performing a number of diplomatic roles, if you like, who's previously got experience working for the Roman army, leading auxiliary troops, which I believe they were usually deployed away from their home territory, right? Which would explain why he was working in the Balkans.
Yeah, they were typically not trusted in their home territories. That's going to change a bit for Germania, just because Germania is so factional that the Romans don't feel they're not as worried about the auxiliary forces betraying them, which is going to kick them in the butt when the Battle of Tuterberg Forest happened. But they had to serve as meat shields. They were typically always front in the line, so if there was an ambush, they would be the ones who'd catch it most of the time. And they were typically they filled in a lot of positions, but they were typically the least favored of the Roman troops. They preferred their own.
Right, so we get then to the year 9 AD. And what exactly is happening in Germania at this time?
So in 9 AD, we've had Varus for a couple years now, and the sources are saying that he's kind of overstepping his bounds. And this is coming with hindsight. So all these sources are writing after the Battle of Teutoburg Forest. So of course they're going to say Varus he's overstepping his bounds. He's causing a lot of issues right now. But they talk about how he's increasing taxes to the empire to a monthly tax that would be typical of a province. He's forcing them to do labor for the Roman Empire, and he's disrespecting their culture and just causing an increase in discontent. And Varus's job was to Romanize these provinces, try to make them fit in, get in line.
Mm-hmm.
So that way Roman cities could be set up, the culture could spread, and the provinces could become a stable part of the empire. The sources, of course, argue that he's doing this too soon, but to be fair, this was a typical pattern for the Romans, so Varus isn't doing anything abnormal by trying this. While he's doing this, he's using Arminius to travel around with him to serve as a diplomat, as a translator, and so forth. And Arminius is making connections. He's seeing what's happening in the provinces, and he knows who's disgruntled and who's not. And so he starts creating a list of possible collaborators. And over the next few years, up to 9 AD, he starts slowly spreading his web of co-conspirators across Germania. The Romans admit that it was probably pretty slow because they never catch on to it. And so over these next few years, he's spreading his web, he's slowly gaining allies until we reach the year 9 AD when he can finally start his plan.
Right, so it's 9 AD. By the way, Arminius himself, how old is he at this point? And he was from a noble family already in Germania. Is that why he was able to build up connections and kind of put himself at the leadership of a potential revolt?
Yeah, so he's born 1817 BC, so he's still pretty young while he's doing this. And that would make him, 26, 27 at this time? So he's still pretty young doing this. And then the reason that the Romans give for him being able to do this is because of his position with Varus. He's a well-trusted, quote-unquote, Roman supporter who's being able to go throughout the entire territory of Germania, both provinces, without the Romans batting an eye, because he's either with Varus or he's doing missions for Varus. So, of course, he's out and about talking to local tribes. So he's being able to create these connections while other nobles aren't being able to because they don't have that relationship with Varus. The other reason why he's being able to do this is because he's just very charismatic. He's got the training from the Romans. He knows how to be a diplomat. But the Romans also admit that he was just a swell guy. Everyone could get along with Arminius. Varus even considered him one of his closest friends. This guy was just one of the best.
Silver-tongued.
Exactly. And he's being able to use both of these to build this connection, build these connections, build this web, and keep it completely out of the sight of the Roman Empire.
That's pretty impressive, I think, to kind of build a network up of a possible rebellion and have it completely hidden. That's pretty fascinating.
Yeah, and the sources, at least the ones we know of, because we've lost quite a few sources, they only mention 2 times in the entire 3 years that he's building this plan up that he nearly gets caught. The first time is with his own tribe. It goes back to Arminius is in love with this woman, and her father doesn't like Arminius. In fact, has promised his daughter to another man. And
the only person who doesn't like Arminius, apparently.
Yeah, basically. And so his name is Segetus. He finds out that Arminius is not only still seeing his daughter, but they have been together and so forth, and it's become this huge gossip. Everyone's talking about. Even Varus knows about Arminius and this girl. And so Segetus he's upset. He's angry at Arminius. And so he tries to inform Varus what's about to happen right before Varus goes on his march. And Varus just turns and looks at him and goes, dude, I know you're really, really pissed at Arminius for stealing your daughter, but don't make up lies like that. That is so beneath you. And he doesn't believe him. He just goes on with his march. And so Segetus gets shut down. The other one was Arminius made a mistake. He reached out to this tribe right before launching the attack, hoping to get them on his side. And it was a really dumb decision because everyone knew the leader was a pro-Roman, and the leader just told him, "No, I'm not helping you." And then he goes, "Not only that, but I'm also going to go right now and tell Varus what you're trying to do," which is also a very dumb thing to do. So Arminius immediately has his men grab this leader, and they take him and put him in prison until the plan can be enacted. So only 2 times have been mentioned in the sources over these 3 years where his plan nearly gets revealed to the Romans.
I would imagine that it probably didn't happen, that much more or at all, even if the sources have been lost, because I imagine if it kept happening, you'd think eventually. But then again, Arminius seems pretty silver-tongued. I don't know. He might have been able to get himself out of some... Yeah.
Yeah, and there is one advantage to the Roman view of the Germans. They see them as barbarians, as lesser beings, and this is something that the Romans will always look at the Germans as. And so an elaborate plan to rid all of Germania of the Roman army by our best friend who you happen to be enemies with? Yeah, no, I don't believe you at all, sir. There's no way that could be it. You guys are barbarians. You can't think of something like this.
So there's a bit of kind of almost, I don't know what we'd call it today, kind of, well, actually, I guess we'd call it racism.
Yeah, probably.
But kind of thinking the Germans couldn't put together a plan like this. They're not a civilized people.
Yeah, they're too disunited. They'd rather fight each other and sit in their muck. And there's no way they could ever pose a threat to us good Romans.
Right. Well, we've been kind of foreshadowing it all episode, but we are coming to what some historians, I believe, think is one of the greatest defeats the Roman Empire ever suffers. The Battle of Teutoburg Forest in northern Germany. So, how does this battle come about?
Well, the battle shows Arminius as one of the best tacticians and strategists in history. It's perfectly set up. It goes off without a hitch, and except for a couple of glitches during the battle itself, it's a complete success. The Battle of Tuterberg Forest was all planned out by Arminius from the beginning to the end. The only thing he couldn't control was how long it was going to take. His hopes was to have it done within a day or two, and it took 4 days in total. But still, went off great. His plan starts with word reaching Varus that far to the northeast, a rebellion is starting to grow. Now, we're not sure if Arminius told him or if he had someone in the conspiracy tell Varus, but Varus gets the word, and so he sets out with 3 legions to set out to the far northeast corner of his territory to deal with this rebellion, leaving with about 15,000 men.
Wow, big army for the ancient times.
Yeah.
So I'm guessing from the name of the battle, they have to cover some not particularly favourable terrain to get there.
Yeah, Arminius, being the kind friend of Varus that he is, actually provides Varus with this trail to where the rebellion's supposed to be. And Varus, of course, takes the trail, accepting that Arminius knows the way. And at first, things are fine. Varus has a large army. He's got plenty of supplies. He's got a decent-sized auxiliary force with him, and in fact has just sent Arminius out with the majority of that auxiliary force to gather more supplies and more troops. So, those guys should be joining any day now. And, the trail's a little bad, but there's just a couple of fallen trees. Well, okay, quite a few fallen trees for this area on the path. But, they can move past that. And then, oh, great, a storm hits. And it's a really bad storm, apparently. And it slows the Romans down completely. So the sources don't agree how far they've made it, but it's probably about 6 to 8 days into this trip. Far, far away from communications, far, far away from any fort or supply point, when they're in the area that we believe the Battle of Tuterberg happened. And Arminius, who should be arriving any day with the reinforcements, with the auxiliary forces, does arrive. But they're not reinforcements, they're the rebellion army. Mm-hmm. And they catch the Romans completely unorganized. The Romans are scattered along a couple of miles in no formation. You'd have soldiers talking to civilians. You'd have your commanders all grouped together towards the front or in the center. The supply wagons would be intermingled with everything. It's just a complete mess when this attack happens. And it devastates the Romans. And over the next 4 days, with a small break on day 3, the Roman army goes from 15,000, led by Governor Varus, to a couple of hundred, with Varus laying dead on the field.
Jeez.
Wow.
And not a single word of warning will be able to reach Roman front lines before Arminius and his army is ready to march again.
Jeez.
An incredibly kind of complete victory, really.
It is. But what I was going to say, the one thing with the Battle of Tuterburg Forest is everyone knows the Battle of Tuterburg Forest. Like, oh, this is an awesome battle. Complete defeat of the Romans, that's that. It is a defeat of 3 Roman legions, but the Germans don't get their freedom for quite a few years. The battle's in 9 AD. They don't get their freedom until 17 AD.
Okay.
So this campaign is just starting with the battle. It's a brilliant success, but it's by far nowhere near over.
It's the opening kind of round, if you like.
Exactly.
Let's just delve for a moment into some of the details of this battle then. Of course, Arminius is sent off, presumably with the German auxiliaries, to gather more reinforcements. This is exactly kind of what he wants. What exactly, or do we know, was his kind of battle plan? Do we know in terms of the tactics and strategy used in this battle what went on?
We do have a couple of sources that survived the battle. The Romans love to say that everyone was annihilated, but if that was the case, we'd have no sources for this battle. Mm-hmm. But we do have a couple of sources detailing the battle out for us, and from what they tell us is that Varus is told by Arminius that, hey, we're going to be passing by my home tribe. I can get you supplies, I can get you more men, and guides that can show us through the territory we're going. Let me go, and I'll go get these men for you. And Varus, of course, agrees. So Arminius leaves, and at this point, he starts gathering his army, but he leaves a small force behind to slow the Romans down, to buy him some more time. And that's why all these trees start appearing on the path. All these trees have moved. And then, because the wagons, they can't go off route. So with these trees in the way, the Romans are slowed down. And just so happens that luck intervenes on Arminius' side, which, by the way, happens at least 2 more times during this rebellion. And the weather hits, and it just completely demolishes the trail, and so the Romans are slowed even more. This all works for Arminius because it allows him to gather more troops who are they had to wait until Varus was on the move before, because if they started organizing too fast, Varus might catch on and be able to stop his march and turn around and go back. So they're just now starting to organize, and they wait on the cliffs and the hills right next to where they want to ambush the Romans. And they wait until the Romans are about halfway through the ambush, and then they pounce. The Romans are able to beat or retreat, but they lose all organization during that first half. And they retreat and they form what we believe to be a small fort in a flooded plain area. And they hold off during the night. And then Varus decides to try to keep retreating. He's trying to get out. And so instead of holding his fort, he leaves. And they go into the second part of Arminius' trap, which is on the path back, there's a fork in the road. One side of it goes in between 2 huge hills. That's a dead zone.
Yeah.
The Romans know that. Mm. The other side of the path goes along the outside of one of those hills, but what they don't realize is that the ground on the far side of it is complete swamp. And so it's literally that road up against the hill that they can use. If they try to go off the road, they get stuck in the mire, and their heavy armor are to slow them down and drag them into the muck. And so Arminius is waiting. Once they reach that road and start going down it, he actually has, according to the sources, a wall of dirt that he pushes off that hill onto the road, collapsing it on top of the Romans. Wow. Completely causing more chaos and decimates the Roman organization. A huge portion of the army gets caught here and slaughtered because they have nowhere to go. If they run into the swamp, they get worn out, and the lightly armored German barbarians can easily cut them down. Day 3 is where his plan goes awry, because unlike the Romans, who have training and military discipline, the Germans are in this for the loot and for revenge. And so revenge has been fulfilled the last 2 days. Now it's time to start looting. And that's what they do. Day 3, Arminius is saying, guys, the fight's not over. There's still some more Romans. We need to kill them. Come on, come on. And the Germans are busy grabbing what loot they can, finding a couple of the eagles that have been left by the legion, and, enjoying their spoils of war. So day 3 is kind of a licking their wounds sort of day. Day 4 is the final day of the battle. Varus is still alive at this point, and his men get caught out in the open again. There's another storm, completely decimates Roman morale, wears them out, and the Germans attack. And that's it. Only a few are able to escape in the confusion, and Varus is found dead.
I would just quite like to ask for a second here, because I've heard a little bit about what happened to Varus's head following the battle. I've heard that Arminius seemingly sent his head to some people.
Yeah, so this goes actually back into Arminius' backstory, but he was still trying to create allies. And one of those allies was Maroboduus, that gentleman I mentioned earlier. Maroboduus had one of the most powerful armies in the north. In fact, it was so powerful that Augustus feared that it would cause a problem for him, and he tried to eliminate it before. And so Arminius cut off the head of Varus and sent it to Maroboduus, hoping that Maroboduus would see this and take it as a sign as, hey, the Germans are kicking the Romans' butt. If we join their side now, we could actually get rid of the Romans in the area. Maroboduus doesn't do that, though. He kind of chickens out He's way too scared of Roman power. And so he sends the head back to Augustus instead. So Augustus gets the head after just receiving the news that his armies have been wiped out.
Oh, boy.
I'm sure that was good. A good kind of thing to open in the mail. Wow. I mean, they say to the victor the spoils. I mean, to the loser, your head is now going on tour around ancient Europe. I mean, the story of the battle, it is quite an iconic battle in Roman history, and I think with good reason. It seems like Arminius kind of planned this almost perfectly down to the T. He knew the ground over which this would be fought. And on the other hand, Varus, I was actually going to ask, did the Romans not build a fort? Because when they were marching, the Roman army, I believe, used to every night build a fort as an encampment. I suppose, would historians say that Varus made the wrong choice, like leaving the fort they hastily built?
Historians, again, are mixed on it. They understand why Varus had to do it. First of all, no one knows what's happening to him. Everyone knows that Varus is going far to the north to deal with the rebellion. It could be weeks before they hear from him again about how that rebellion's going.
Mm-hmm.
Communication is just that slow. So if he's stuck holding this fort, he might have the supplies, he might not. We don't know how much of his wagons he was able to get out. But it could be weeks before any sort of reinforcements could arrive. And that's even if they knew where to go. Because remember, this route was specifically chosen by Arminius. So the Roman army might not go the same path, might have no idea where to go after that. So there is some logic to why Varus would want to leave the fort. Problem is that Arminius had planned on that, and there was just nothing Varus could do to counteract that.
Mm. It does strike me as a really kind of what a nightmare to be trapped in as a Roman soldier. These ferocious barbarian warriors charging out the trees. You've got no kind of hope of escape. They could be lurking in any corner. The storms, the kind of chaos of disorganized retreat. I mean, people talk about, talking of history podcasters, Dan Carlin talks about the Battle of Canet, where the Roman army was destroyed in a day by Hannibal, and people being caught in that pincer movement, and the kind of that being one of the most horrific moments in history. But in a way, for me, this being spread over 4 days, what a kind of living hell that would have been to go through.
Yeah.
And a lot of people don't realize that it wasn't just Roman soldiers who would have been in this battle. The Romans were taking enough supplies and civilian population to keep them happy and supplied for the ongoing rebellion, which could take up to a year, maybe longer. And so there's cooks, there's prostitutes, there's wives, there's children. They're not leaving all their people behind. They take them with them on this campaign because this could be their new station. And so it's not just the soldiers who get caught in this moment.
Terrific.
Yeah, that's really sobering. You can just almost imagine a council of war sitting down on the first night in that fort, thinking, well, we're in a safe position here, we should hold out. But then that realization of, well, nobody might get to us. Nobody might not get word of what's happened to us for weeks. Then they might have to gather an army, which will take weeks or months. Then they'll have to march to find us, and they won't know where we are. And that horrific moment of realization for Varus and for the Romans of, we haven't got a choice here.
Mm-hmm. What Varus didn't even know had happened was that his other 2 legions were also being hit at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
What Arminius's second half of the Battle of Teutoburg Forest was to attack the other two legions in detail with local tribes, because Varus had set up his legions as police force. And so there'd be a couple of soldiers in each village to keep the peace, make sure nothing was going on, things like that. There was only a few key centers of actual military power. And so as the Battle of Teutoburg Forest is raging, several of these tribes will successfully eliminate their local soldiers and take complete control without the Romans being able to build up resistance. So even if Varus got word out, his two other legions are being completely annihilated right now, and will be busy just trying to hold their own positions and have no hope of reaching him. Even
it's
if they
an
try.
Incredibly well coordinated plan then. Certainly more, I guess, than the Romans would have expected from a barbarian.
I did have a quick question. It might be a little specific, and I don't know if the sources are there. How quickly did Varus realize that he was betrayed by Arminius? Did he know immediately? Did he make his presence known, or was it something he discovered over time?
The sources aren't 100% clear on the matter. They do say that eventually Varus realized it, that Arminius was part of this plot, but they're not sure if it was Arminius let himself be recognized immediately as it began, or if he was waiting on the sidelines and he just so happened to see him one day. They're not too sure. But Varus does know before he dies that his friend Arminius has been behind this plot the entire time.
Wow.
So you alluded to the fact that this is just the first battle of a long campaign to free Germania of Roman rule. Before we get into that campaign, I just wanted to ask a quick question, which was Arminius's role. You said it was quite typical of barbarians raised in Rome in order to be, as you said, auxiliary leaders or negotiators or translators, diplomats, things like that. Given that Arminius was able to exploit the privileged position he was given by the Romans, he was able to use that position as the diplomat to build up in secret this rebellion. Did the Romans, or do we know if the Romans rethought the way they used barbarians after Arminius's revolt?
Oh, yes. Right after word reaches Augustus that he has lost 3 legions and 2 of his other legions have been mauled beyond recognition, and has given the head of Varus, he snaps. What a lot of people don't realize is that Germans were a large part of the Roman army. They made up a huge part of the auxiliary force. There was even a bodyguard unit for Augustus that was made up completely of German tribesmen. Okay, so Germans were well-respected warriors. Augustus snaps. If Arminius has betrayed him, who can he trust? And he orders all Roman soldiers to arrest German auxiliary troops. He has his own bodyguard put into jail.
Wow.
Cannot trust any of them. And then, of course, he goes around doing his famous little Varus, give me back my allegiance thing around the palace. So, yeah, Augustus, he has a slight mental break. We will see the German auxiliary come back into use during the rebellion/civil war in the last half of it. But for the next couple of years, we're going to see a lot of German soldiers who've been happily serving the Romans suddenly being thrown into jail because they're German.
So, we've had the Battle of Teutoburg Forest, very famous battle, but as you said, this campaign lasts many years. Germania doesn't get its freedom, did you say 17 AD?
Yes.
So what happens next?
Well, the next half is actually... next half, I guess the next 9/10 of the war is the hardest part of Arminius's plan, and it's simply to outlast the Roman Empire.
Difficult job.
Yeah, but he knows that's literally the only way to beat him. He can't pull off another Teutoburg Forest and still expect to win. I mean, yeah, Rome lost 3 legions. They can instantly reproduce those overnight. That's not going to be an issue. Manpower will never be an issue in this early part of the Roman Empire. He can't expect to outmaneuver him all the time. He's used his best trump card. Okay, everyone now knows who Arminius is, so that's out of the question. His plan is simply to outlast them, and it's going to be a brutal couple of years. Now, the rest of 9 AD is actually a smashing success for Arminius. He is able to take all except for 1/4 of the territory between the Elbe and the Rhine. All of that falls under his jurisdiction by the end of the year.
Wow.
It's pretty astonishing.
But from 10 to 17 AD, it is a series of brutal invasions by the Romans that will see massive depopulation of the Germans, either from massacres or simply moving them to Gaul and other parts of the empire to get them out of the territory. They'll see complete devastation of their crops, of their land, and in the end, it's simply just hoping that eventually the Romans will give up. Nothing else he can do.
At this point, was Arminius solidly like the recognized political leader of the Germans? Was he, a king? What kind of role did he have?
And see, that's the tricky part with Arminius and the Germans. The Romans would see him as a king. They'd be like, yeah, this is king, this is your main leader. In fact, they put a bounty on his head and say, if you bring us him, we're even Steven. They see him as the big threat. But Arminius, while he's able to keep a united front against the Romans going, mainly thanks to the Roman brutality, he is not able to maintain control all the time. Like I mentioned at the Battle of Teutoburg Forest, he loses control on day 3. He will have that happen time and time again. In fact, he almost pulls off another successful Battle of Teutoburg Forest Part 2 that is completely gone away with because he loses control of the army. So the Romans will love to say he's a king, but to the Germans, he's just a really, really good warrior that as long as he says what we want him to say, we'll follow. But as soon as someone else says something that will get me more shiny stuff or get me more glory, yeah, I'm going to follow him.
So his aim is to outlast the Romans, and he manages it. How does that actually come about? Do the Romans just give up on Germania? Do they think, no, we're never going to retake it? And
Well,
how do they come to that conclusion?
See, that's the tricky part. No one agrees on what exactly, leads to the Romans finally saying, all right, screw this. We're done with this territory. Our arguments have gone on, ever since we rediscovered the Battle of Tuterberg Forest, what led to the Romans giving up on the territory. The campaigns overall went really, really well for the. They have a couple of minor set. One involves, actually, 2 of them involves a freak storm coming in and destroying 2 legions. Yet again, Arminius has super luck when it comes to weather. And then another time, they actually capture Arminius's wife and unborn son. He will actually never get to meet his son, and he'll never get to see his wife again after that. But the Romans are very successful. They make quite a name for themselves while they're beating the Germans into a pulp. But in 17 AD, Emperor Tiberius just tells Germanicus, his nephew, who is actually the son of Drusius, to give it up, that we're done here. And I talked about a couple of a couple of possible reasons why this happened. There's a rebellion in Africa, North Africa, that happens, and having lost 5 legions in total and a couple of other legions worth of soldiers already in Germany, Tiberius just goes, you know what? North Africa is much more important. We need to go deal with that. Just leave the Germans on their own. There's also the fact that Augustus, right before he died, told Tiberius, look, no more growth. We are beyond our limit rate as we are now. So just no more growth. Stay where we are. And Tiberius may have taken that at heart and said, okay, then I'm cutting off Germania and we stick with the Rhine. The final reason is a little bit more personal. Tiberius was always kind of jealous of his brother, Drusius, because Drusius was charismatic, he was handsome, he was successful. Tiberius, he was kind of socially awkward in the beginning, and he always had issues with Augustus, while Augustus loved Drusius. Favored son sort of situation. Well, Germanicus, the son of Drusius, is loved by the people. He's doing really well. He's very charismatic like his father. Okay, you're doing great in Germany, but you're doing almost too great. So we're going to have to pull you back. And this theory actually comes from the fact that Germanicus will die 2 years later under suspicious circumstances. And so quite a few sources point to Tiberius saying, we're done in Germany because I really don't want you to become so popular you'll throw me.
Right.
So as a quick aside, I mentioned earlier that all the German troops for the Romans were locked up. Well, towards the end of the war, due to all the losses that the Romans were taking, they released their auxiliary forces because they basically needed them again. And in these auxiliary forces was a man by the name of Flavius. Now, Flavius was immediately taken by the Romans to where they believed Arminius was. And this is when the Romans were kind of losing the war due to a freak storm that just wiped out, 2 of their legions. And the reason why Flavius was so important to them was because he was the younger brother of Arminius. And unlike Arminius, Flavius had stayed loyal. So they bring Flavius, and Flavius stands across the river's edge and shouts over to the Germans to bring out Arminius. Arminius comes out. He's a little curious, sees his brother, and he just says, what's up? And Flavius starts telling him to surrender. Give up now. The Romans will be peaceful. They'll be merciful. Think of all that they could bring to the people. If you just give yourself up now, they will let everyone go home. Arminius, a little bit surprised that his brother's doing this to him, also really upset knowing everything that's been happening in Germany. The Romans have been trying to put down this rebellion. Answers back, brother, you don't understand. This is our chance for freedom. If we take this now, if we fight now, we can push the Romans out for good and we can live our own way. We don't have to be under their thumb. And they go back for a little bit, but it starts getting more and more heated as each person starts realizing that they're not getting across the other one. And finally, Arminius just snaps and he says, listen, you little snot, come over here now. I'll let you live. Or don't, and I'll kick your butt tomorrow on the field if I see you. And Flavius gets so riled up, he grabs his horse and he tries to cross the river before the Romans tackle him and drag him back across, while Arminius is going, yeah, that's right. Yeah, you hold on to him. Don't let my little baby brother go away.
Just imagining a Roman centurion going, it's not worth it. He's not worth it.
Let me go. Let me go.
So Flavius and a lot of other Germans would fight for the Romans the next day, and they would actually turn this rebellion into a civil war. But it's just a little interesting side note in this massive war that's going on between the Germans and the Romans.
It's very history's most.
Yeah.
history's most, or history's worst brotherly relation.
So, once they pull out of Germany, what is the kind of general reaction that the Germans have to this?
Business as usual. There is almost no change in the German tribes from when Julius Caesar sees them to after Tiberius tells Germanicus to retreat. They go back into their tribal ways. They start fighting one another. Within a year, one of the local tribes actually asked Rome to intervene against one of their conflicts. For the German tribes, it's back to normal.
I'm sure that request went down famously.
Yeah. Arminius was really upset at this, and he will actually make a play that will cost him his life. But yeah, for the Germans, it was all business as usual.
So this incredible success in driving out the Romans, which, you know, very, very few peoples ever managed, is not really recognized as such at the time, is not appreciated as some amazing kind of triumph, and indeed Arminius himself isn't recognized as being a hero then.
Yeah, for the Germans, well, at least the Germanic tribes at the time, the reason why Arminius isn't seen as much of a hero is believed to be partly because of, you know, the devastation Rome put onto Germany. I mean, yeah, great, you won a battle, but boy, you cost us a lot to get this so-called freedom. Another reason is because of what he does in the last part of his life that really ticks off a lot of Germans. And then finally, he just sort of slips off on the side. Again, the Germans are interested in unity. They're interested in their tribes, in their villages. There is no overarching government or person that they care about. They're more interested in local issues. And Arminius is not part of any other tribe except for his own. So why care about it?
So where does it all go wrong? How does Arminius meet his end?
Well, Arminius, extremely unhappy with what's going on in Germany, believes that if the Germans continue doing as they're doing, Romans will eventually come back. If they stay disunited, Germanicus or someone else will finally convince Tiberius, or he'll die and his replacement will decide to go back into Germany and reestablish the border on the Elbe. That's the last thing that Arminius wants. And so what he decides to do is unite the Germans with the one thing that had united them in the past, and that was a common enemy that was greater than any of them. And this actually works. Our good friend Maroboduus serves as the perfect enemy. Arminius is still upset at him for not helping during this war. It would have been great to have that army to support them, but instead Maroboduus kind of left him to die, so he's going to turn around and beat up Maroboduus for that. The Germans attack. They're wildly successful. Maroboduus is defeated instantaneously. He flees to Rome. He'll live out his life there. And Arminius is able to put a puppet onto the throne of the Marcomanni, who Maroboduus was leading. And so Arminius has defeated the Romans. He has defeated the most powerful tribe in the north, the one that even the Romans had feared. And so he decides now it's his time to act. And he starts going around telling everyone that he wants to unite the tribes and become their king. And so he goes around telling these people this, and he kind of loses his diplomatic edge when he does this. In the past, he was apparently very, he's charismatic, but he's also very diplomatic. If you didn't agree with him, that was fine. He would either work around you or just move past you. In this case, apparently he came across as, you're either with me or you're against me. And so the Germans said, no, that's not going to work with us. And while he was meeting with a couple of supposed friends, they surprised and killed him.
Wow.
And he dies in 21 AD, so that make him in his 30s?
Mid to late 30s, something like that.
So he spent more time trying to drive the Romans out than he actually did get to enjoy Germany without Romans.
Yeah, and to be fair, he was never going to really enjoy Germany without the Romans. His wife and his child would spend the rest of their lives within the Roman Empire. The Romans never forgave Arminius. His son would be humiliated and bullied for the rest of his life. And he and his mother would be watched closely in Ravenna by the Roman authorities. And so for Arminius, he lost the love of his wife. He loses his son that he never got to meet. And he just watched everything he worked for get thrown to the side by the Germans, who were ready to go back to the way things were. So life after the rebellion was kind of sad for Arminius.
Yeah, it is a kind of sad and kind of unceremonious end to what has got to be one of the most kind of important, figures in German history, if not in world history.
Well, yeah, the effect of pushing the Romans out of Germany is going to have an impact for, you could argue, right up to today. The fact that it's outside of the kind of common linguistic and legal framework that the rest or a large part of Europe operates under is going to have really far-reaching consequences. I guess we could kind of... You've put forward, Jacob, Arminius as history's most successful freedom fighter. I guess what is his career in summary, his legacy, his impact on history? Why do you think he was so effective? I mean, his final plan, to me, it sounds like fell down almost because perhaps he was a victim of his own Roman training, in that he grew up in a world of, to use the term very loosely, nation state in Rome, and perhaps he envisaged that for Germany as well, but was really frustrated by the reality on the ground of what Germany was like at that time.
The reason why he's the most successful is because, first of all, he's doing this at a really young age. 25, being able to pull this off with a level head, that's amazing. But the reason why he's the most successful is not because of his plan to unite Germany and make it into a massive state that could compete with the Romans. That was never on the cards for the Germans. There's just no way they could do that. But because he was able to enact the first half of his plan successfully, and that forcing the Romans to surrender all their territory, one of the first major concessions the Roman Empire had ever done in its history, even during the Roman Republic, in giving up this territory and sticking to the Rhine for the remainder of their empire. And not only that, but continuing this legacy of the German warrior to be something to be feared. This is something that had started before Julius Caesar was born, when a tribe came down from Germania and devastated a couple of Roman armies out of nowhere. It's being reinforced by the Battle of Teutoburg Forest. It's reinforced by the image of Augustus running around his palace screaming for his legions to be returned. Arminius is able to successfully free his people, free the German tribes, while not being able to enact his plan as king, but still being able to free them and keep them free until the fall of the Roman Empire.
And it kind of goes back to what we said earlier about that being a buffer zone. about it being a way to prevent the Gauls and Visigoths, from coming in. And in a way, that kind of does happen, and it leads to the fall of the Roman Empire.
Those later barbarian invasions come across the Rhine, don't they? So without the buffer zone, the empire itself is vulnerable.
Yeah, Italy, the Arminius creates the closest border to Rome itself. I mean, the Alps serve as part of this northern frontier, and that's because of Arminius. That could have been pushed further north into the east towards the Elbe, but instead, because of his work, because of this rebellion, it's literally at what we consider the borders of modern-day Italy.
And I wonder, do you think what Arminius did would have had an impact, or did have an impact on European history really for the rest of time since then, in the sense that Germany is a separate entity and doesn't share with, say, the rest of Western Europe, France, Italy, Spain, a common kind of linguistical and legal framework?
Oh, definitely. I mean, there's a clear separation in everything from culture and language along the Rhine that you can still see today. And it follows throughout the entire history of Europe. The Rhine was always this barrier of Latin cultures and Germanic cultures and constant clashing in that area. This is all thanks to the Romans saying, okay, we're staying on the Rhine. Everything on the far side of it can go screw itself. We don't care anymore. That could have been further to the east, or that could have been completely gone and just it disappears somewhere past the Elbe. We'll never know. But Arminius being able to reinforce the border and making sure it never crosses the Rhine again sets up all of these cultural changes and effects in the history that will, affects everything up to including like World War II and so forth.
Wow. Well, I think you've made a very strong case today on History's Most that Arminius was the most successful freedom fighter in history. We are going to close the episode with some quick fire mosts. What we're going to do is we're going to ask you a most or worst in history, and we want your gut instinct, Jacob, the first idea that pops into your head, and give me a quick kind of reason why. Okay, so I'm going to start with history's worst government or leader.
Government or leader? Oof. I would say the Nazi government is the first one that comes to mind.
Yeah.
Coming from a German historian.
Coming from a German expert, I think that's a fair answer.
Yeah. Terrible diplomacy, terrible, everything about it was terrible. Not just morally, but the way they ran things, it was not something that would be able to last long at all on its own.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, its system was just a complete disaster, just waiting to happen.
Fair point. I think we're convinced.
I didn't need much convincing.
Not going to raise a dispute with that one. Okay, history's best general.
History's best general. I'd say Napoleon. Quite feared among the Germans. Very good general, amazing general. Not a very good diplomat. Terrible diplomat. And that's where his big downfall. He just never knew when to stop, never knew how to negotiate. That was his downfall. But as a military leader, one of the best.
History's most complicated or complex event that you have come across or studied?
I'm going to choose this one. The Holy Roman Empire?
Yes.
Yes. I know it's technically not an event, but I'm having to study it because we're in the we're reaching the end of the Roman Empire, and so next we're going to be building up to the Holy Roman Empire, and it's a little terrifying having to read everything that's going on in it for 1,000 years.
Yeah, I'm a history teacher at secondary school, so I guess, I don't know, in the States, is that elementary
That would
school?
be like,
I'm not sure.
secondary school would be like, I think, like junior high or high school.
It's
around that
age
time.
11 to 18.
Yeah.
And
So
when I teach the Tudors, obviously one of the parts is the foreign policy, and we have to kind of introduce the countries of Europe, which are slightly different to today. One of them, the Holy Roman Empire, is there, and you're just like, right, okay, with this, all you need to know is it's not holy, it's not Roman, it's not an empire. So yeah, I kind of do my best to skirt around it, just because it's a massive, complex thing that can't be explained.
I've been doing every Saturday, well, almost every Saturday. I've had to skip a few, but I do a state of the Holy Roman Empire just to show my listeners and so forth on Twitter and Facebook the complexity of it. And I'm still on Anhalt. Anhalt, results, I think, is what we were on last. So we're in the ADs right now. No.
I mean, I think is there over 300 states of the Holy Roman Empire, something like that?
Oh, yeah, there's
something.
At one time, I think there's over 300, but a lot of them fractionalized. Like Anhalt splits into like 12, I think.
Okay, that's straightforward, because Anhalt, of course, is quite a small region of Germany, so just the 12.
Yeah, just the 12 of that small area.
Wow, I mean, yeah, if you did one of those each Saturday, what was that, over 300? So that would take you, quick bit of maths, 6 years?
And,
Amazing.
Just trying to think of how to deal with the Holy Roman Empire, what could be a good decade on podcast, is also a little like, can we get past this? Also, Napoleon's one of the best generals because he kills that.
He destroys the Holy Roman Empire.
Destroys it.
Dismantles it. Did a service to everyone.
Yes.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, I did a year abroad, so I lived a year during my university studies in Bavaria, which is actually quite a sensible kingdom within the Holy Roman Empire. You know, it's not, it's quite big. But even then, like the next biggest city, Nuremberg, it was its own state during the Holy Roman Empire. And it's Protestant, whereas Bavaria is the most Catholic place in Germany. So yeah, I was just already confused. And that's one state and one city. Well, Jacob, thank you so much for coming on.
Oh, my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
I hope you've enjoyed it.
We certainly have.
Yeah.
I have immensely.
And of course, we would advise, nay, demand of all our listeners that they go and check out podcast on Germany. There'll
be a link
narrative history
in the description, of course.
Yes, absolutely. From when do you start? What date do you start with?
Prehistory, pre-written history. So right now we are dealing. The episode I'm actually recording tomorrow, if my voice holds, is the Battle of Adrianople. So we are dealing with the beginning of the end of the Roman Empire.
Now that is a tasty battle. Brilliant. Well, everyone should go and check that out. I hope you enjoyed this episode. It was a little bit different to normal, but it was immense fun. So, I've been Alex.
I've been Peter.
And thank you for listening to History's Most.